You know, we treat knowledge a lot like a hoarding situation. Think about it.
Oh, totally.
You've probably got like dozens of unread articles bookmarked on your browser right now, or, a towering stack of nonfiction books on your nightstand.
Right, the stack that just keeps magically growing every time you visit a bookstore.
Exactly. And countless saves videos in some obscure playlist you're supposedly going to watch when you finally have the time.
Yeah, we stockpile all this information in our mental attic, endlessly gathering it, waiting for this perfect, flawless strategy to just magically assemble itself out of the clutter.
Which is wild.
Mm.
So, okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are staging an intervention on that mental attic.
A much needed intervention, I'd say.
Seriously.
Yeah.
We're looking at concepts from Darius Foroux's work, specifically The Catalyst, 21 Ideas for a Life of Action. We want to figure out why reading just, one more article won't save you and what actually will.
Right, because we are exploring that massive, often completely ignored gap between merely consuming information and actually transforming your life with it.
Because the ultimate shortcut to being well-informed might honestly be the slightly terrifying realization that you already know enough. So if you are the kind of person who loves to learn, who's always digging for that next big insight, this is going to hit very close to home.
It definitely will, because for the learner listening right now, our relentless pursuit of more data is often the exact thing preventing us from experiencing more results.
Yeah, I feel like we trick ourselves a lot with that.
And Four anchors this whole philosophy around a really relatable case study. It's about this young man who felt completely, utterly stuck. I mean, he has goals, he has dreams.
But every single day, he's just looping in the exact same exhausting cycle.
Exactly. Procrastination, followed by overthinking, followed by a total lack of direction.
I mean, I catch myself doing this all the time. I'll think, once I finish this deep dive series on marketing, then I'll be ready to launch the project.
Yeah, and the core of his paralysis, and ours really, is that he kept waiting for the perfect moment. What's fascinating here is the underlying psychology of that wait.
Right, because why is it so easy to trick ourselves into thinking that reading just one more book or finding the perfect strategy will magically fix our lack of direction?
Well, it's because we confuse the search for the perfect moment with actual tangible progress. Searching for the perfect strategy or waiting for ideal market conditions, it feels like work.
Oh, it really does. Your brain is fully engaged.
Right, you're evaluating options, you're reading another book, but structurally, it's just a highly sophisticated excuse to delay action.
It feels like I'm doing the hard work, but if I'm being perfectly honest with myself, I'm really just avoiding the possibility of failing. I'm choosing the comfort of research over, the reality of trying.
Because preparation is safe, execution involves risk. I mean, when you are reading a book about launching a business or getting fit, you're getting this dopamine hit of progress without any of the vulnerability of failure.
It's an ego protection strategy. We'd rather be a theoretical success than a practical work in progress.
Precisely. The young man's procrastination wasn't laziness, it was defense mechanism. By waiting for a perfect moment, which Forough explicitly notes never came he never had to face the possibility that his efforts might not work out right away.
Which brings up something so crucial for you listening right now. Think about your own life for a second.
Yeah, you probably have a project or a goal or a tough conversation you've been putting off.
What is that perfect moment you're waiting for?
Oh.
Is it like a meeting you are over-prepping for because you're terrified of a question you can't answer?
Or maybe a creative project you are holding back on until you have better equipment.
Oh man, the better equipment excuse.
Yeah.
That is an absolute classic.
Yeah.
Like, I can't start creating content until I buy a $300 microphone,
Right.
or I can't start running until I get the exact right shoes.
And that leads us right into the turning point of this whole framework. The turning point happens when this young man discovers a staggeringly simple truth.
Okay, lay it on us.
Success is not about knowing more. Success is about applying what you already know.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because it shifts the entire burden of success. We love the blueprint analogy, right? Like, you have the blueprints to a magnificent house, and you just keep staring at them for years.
Yeah, analyzing the angles, adjusting the measurements.
Right, but you aren't laying any actual bricks. You're just standing in the rain wondering why you don't have a roof over your head yet.
And to push that analogy further, it's not just that you aren't laying bricks, it's that you keep going back to architecture school to learn more about bricks while your lot sits entirely empty.
Wow. Yeah, that is a much more accurate picture of information overload.
If we connect this to the broader context of Foroux's argument, stopping this excuse-making machine is the exact catalyst for real action. Think of knowledge as potential energy.
Okay, like a boulder on a hill.
Exactly. A boulder resting at the top of a hill has a massive amount of potential energy. It's impressive, it has the capacity to do a lot of work, but it doesn't actually do anything until it's pushed.
Right, action is the kinetic energy.
Yes. All the books you've read, the videos you've watched, the deep dives you've consumed, they are just potential energy. They're completely inert until you apply them in the physical world.
So the moment he realizes this, he stops waiting. He stops making excuses and starts taking action.
But he doesn't just flail around wildly.
Which is a huge mistake a lot of us make, right? When we finally decide to do something, we get a burst of motivation and just burn ourselves out in a weekend.
Yeah, the classic burnout. Instead, he starts relying on these powerful, timeless principles. Foroux outlines 21 big ideas, but we really want to focus on the underlying mechanisms of a crucial handful today.
Let's start with the big one. Time is your most valuable asset. Now, I feel like we hear this all the time. It's practically a cliche.
It really is.
But why do we act like it's not? Why do we waste it so easily if it's our most valuable asset?
Well, because time doesn't feel like it's draining. I mean, if someone took $100 out of your bank account every morning, you would notice immediately, right?
Absolutely, I would panic.
You'd find the leak and stop it. But when we lose an hour to scrolling on our phones or a day to overthinking a simple decision, there's no immediate alarm bell. The mechanism of scarcity just isn't visible to our brains.
That makes so much sense. It's invisible loss.
Exactly. Plus, psychologists talk about temporal discounting. We naturally value immediate comfort over future rewards. We treat our future selves like strangers who have to deal with the consequences of our current wasted time.
So Forouz's point is that you have to artificially manufacture that alarm bell yourself.
Right. You have to treat time with the same ruthless accounting that you apply to your money because unlike money, you literally cannot earn more time.
Which makes the next principle really fascinating to me. Consistency beats talent. I feel like society loves to romanticize raw talent.
Oh, we obsess over it.
We love the myth of the genius who just wakes up, rolls out of bed, and creates a masterpiece without even trying.
We do, but it's a myth that actively hurts us. If we connect this to the bigger picture, why does consistency actually beat talent in the long run? It's about the neurological reality of it.
Okay, how so?
Well, talent, in a lot of ways, relies on unpredictable emotional states. You have to feel inspired to use your talent. You have to be in the zone.
Right, which you can't just summon on command.
Exactly. But consistency builds structural neural pathways. When you do something every single day, whether you feel like it or not, you are literally wiring your brain to perform that task with less and less friction over time. Talent is a mood. Consistency is an infrastructure.
I love that. So the young man Foroux describes wasn't necessarily the smartest or most talented guy in the room. He just built better infrastructure to escape his procrastination loop.
He showed up every day, which requires the next principle. Focus creates results. But let's be clear about what focus actually means here.
It's not just paying attention, is it?
No, it's not just staring at a screen. It's the mechanism of deep work. When you constantly switch between tasks, checking an email, reading an article, trying to write a report, you experience what cognitive scientists call attention residue.
Attention residue. So a part of your brain gets left behind.
Exactly. A part of your brain is still actively thinking about that email while you're trying to write. Focus is about eliminating that residue. It's channeling all your cognitive power into a single, highly concentrated beam.
Rather than a scattered dim light bulb.
Precisely.
Okay, which brings us to the one that always causes a bit of friction for me. Discipline creates freedom. Now, I have to push back on this.
Go for it.
When I hear discipline, I don't think of freedom. I think of an alarm clock blaring at 4 a.m. I think of strict, rigid schedules, eating unseasoned chicken breast, and never going out with friends.
The boot camp mindset.
Yeah. Doesn't discipline fundamentally mean locking yourself into a restrictive box? How does a box equal freedom? Those sound like total opposites.
Well, if we look at what Foroux is really saying, it's not about punishment. It's about removing friction. Let's look at your rigid box idea. When you lack discipline, you are constantly negotiating with yourself.
Oh, the internal monologue. Should I work out today?
Should I work on that project now? Or maybe after dinner, should I watch one more episode? That constant internal negotiation causes severe decision fatigue. It actively drains your mental energy.
I feel that.
You wake up with a finite amount of willpower, and you waste it all just deciding what to do, leaving nothing left for actually doing it.
Okay, wait, so it's like automating your finances.
How do you mean?
Well, if you have to manually log into your bank app and transfer money to your savings account every single day, you'll eventually forget, or you'll convince yourself you need the money for something else today.
Right.
But if you set up an auto transfer, it just happens. You don't even think about it.
Right. That is a brilliant analogy. Discipline is setting up the auto transfer for your behavior. By making those baseline decisions automatic, setting a rule, and sticking to it unconditionally, you remove the negotiation.
You free up all that cognitive bandwidth for the things that actually matter.
Exactly. That is the freedom Foroux was talking about. It's freedom from anxiety, freedom from procrastination, freedom from the guilt of laying in bed at night knowing you didn't do what you said you would do.
The auto transfer analogy really makes it click for me. The discipline isn't the prison. It's the walls of the house that keep the storm out so you can actually relax inside.
Beautifully put.
So let's move from building that initial momentum to how we handle the inevitable roadblocks. Because, as soon as you start taking action, then things are going to go wrong.
It's guaranteed.
Yeah. And Foroux highlights a few key ideas here for resilience and scale. He says, learning never stops. Failure is feedback, not defeat. And small actions create extraordinary outcomes.
Let's unpack the learning aspect first. Learning never stops. Sounds like we're just telling you to go back to hoarding books, which contradicts literally everything we just said.
Right, go back to the mental attic.
Exactly. But in this context, learning isn't passive accumulation, it's active integration. It's the difference between watching a tutorial on how to code versus writing the code yourself, making a mistake, and figuring out why it broke.
Which directly feeds into how you view failure.
Yeah.
Failure is feedback, not defeat.
Yes.
Now look, we've all seen this written on a million sunset motivational posters.
Yeah.
Sounds great in theory, but it's really hard to actually believe when you've just bombed a major presentation at work or a creative project you poured your heart into completely flops.
It hurts.
It feels like a crushing defeat.
It feels like a crushing defeat because of how our brains are evolutionarily wired. When we
Right.
fail in a modern context, our amygdala, the fear center of the brain, often hijacks our rational thought.
So it's a biological response.
Totally. It interprets a failed project the same way a hunter-gatherer brain interprets a physical threat, like a predator. It floods your system with stress hormones and tells you, run away, stop doing this, it's dangerous.
Wow.
Foroux is advocating for a deliberate, conscious override of that biological system. It's not about forcing a fake, toxic, positive attitude. It's treating failure as a literal, objective data-gathering mechanism.
It reminds me of playing a really difficult video game.
Oh, hey, I like this.
Think about it. Your character misses a jump, falls into a pit, and you lose a life.
Yeah.
You don't throw the controller out the window and declare that you are fundamentally broken as a human being.
Right, you don't view it as a total defeat of your moral character.
No, you just realize you jumped a half second too late. It's purely data. It's feedback on where the obstacle is.
Exactly.
You respawn, you run up to that exact same ledge, and you jump slightly earlier.
Yeah.
The failure was literally the mechanism that taught you how to pass the level. Without the failure, you wouldn't know where the edge was.
That is exactly the mindset shift Foroux is talking about. You are taking the emotion out of the error. You are bypassing that amygdala hijack. And when you do that, it ties perfectly into the next principle. Small actions create extraordinary outcomes.
Because you're just making small adjustments.
Yes. When you view failure merely as feedback, you aren't trying to conquer the entire video game or the entirety of your life goals in one flawless, sweeping motion. You are just trying to make the next jump correctly.
We always think of life transformations as these massive cinematic mountain climbs. We want the movie montage sequence where everything changes in 3 minutes of upbeat music.
But that's intimidating. It triggers that exact fear response we just talked about.
Yeah, it's paralyzing.
If you tell yourself you need to write a whole 300-page book, your brain panics and you procrastinate. If you tell yourself you need to write one single paragraph today, your brain says, okay, we can do that without dying.
I mean, that makes these principles so much more approachable.
Foroux champions these small actions because they sneak past our fear response. They're infinitely sustainable. It's the compound interest of habit formation. You make a 1% adjustment today, a 1% adjustment tomorrow.
And individually, those actions are almost invisible.
But compounded over a year, they steer you completely out of that lack of direction and into a totally different life.
Which brings us to the climax of the young man's story. This is where we see the domino effect of all these principles working together in real time.
Yeah, the sequence of transformation.
Foroux lays out the exact sequence. He says slowly.
Hmm.
His mindset changed. Then his habits changed. Then his life changed. He became more productive, more confident, more focused.
And there is a vital detail here from the text that we cannot gloss over. This was not because of luck. It was entirely because he was living by these principles.
The causality there is so important to understand.
It really is. Notice the specific order of the dominoes. Mindset first, then habits, then life. Life changing is the trailing indicator. It's the very last domino to fall.
So people get incredibly frustrated because they change their habits for a week, they show up and do the work, and their life hasn't drastically altered yet.
Right, they think the system is broken, but the physical results always lag behind the behavioral changes. You have to trust the sequence.
But here's the thing I keep bumping up against. Forough writes this incredible line: one idea can change a day, but the right ideas can change a lifetime.
It's a great line.
It is. But for the listener right now, someone who is nodding along on their commute or while doing the dishes, someone who absolutely agrees that they need to apply what they know, how do they actually bridge that gap?
What do you mean?
How do you go from changing just one random Tuesday by applying a cool idea you heard on a deep dive to actually changing your entire lifetime?
This raises an important question, and it strikes at the absolute heart of the material. Bridging that gap isn't about finding a magic bridge. It's about identity.
Identity.
Yeah. The source text tells us the greatest minds in history left clues for success, but most people ignore them. Why? Because truly applying them requires changing who you fundamentally are.
Oh, wow.
Bridging the gap from one day to a lifetime happens when you stop viewing these principles as external tools that you pick up and put down when it's convenient and start viewing them as your new baseline identity.
So it's not just something you do, it's someone you become.
Exactly. You don't just do a small action for extraordinary outcomes on a Tuesday. You become a person who prioritizes small actions every single day as a rule.
So the knowledge you've been hoarding in your mental attic is just the map.
Yes, the map is incredibly useful. It shows you the terrain, but the map doesn't drive the car. You have to get behind the wheel. Transformation only happens when you become the person who finally applies the clues.
So what does this all mean? It means we have to radically shift how we value information. We have to stop viewing the acquisition of knowledge as the finish line.
The finish line is the application.
And Forough hands us the ultimate power line to sum this all up. It's blunt, but it's exactly what we need to hear. He says, your life changes the moment you stop collecting ideas and start living them.
Stop collecting, start living. It is a profound shift from passive consumption to active engagement with the world around you.
So let's bring this all together. If you want the things this young man achieved, if you want more focus, if you want better habits, greater success, and a stronger, more resilient mindset, the path isn't hidden in some ancient scroll you haven't read yet.
No, it's not in the next book you buy.
The path is to start applying just one powerful idea every single day. Stop waiting for the perfect moment. Put down the blueprints and pick up a brick. Stop letting your knowledge act as a buffer against the real world and start using it as an actual catalyst for action.
The source tells us that the greatest minds left a trail of clues for success, but they also left a warning: knowledge alone, no matter how profound, doesn't change a single thing in your life. Only action does. So looking back at all those endless browser tabs you have open, the towering stacks of books on your desk, the deep dives you've consumed over the years, what is the one piece of life-changing knowledge you already possess that you are actively choosing not to act on today?